My name is Lyndsey Stonebridge. I'm Professor of Humanities and Human Rights at the University of Birmingham in the UK. Welcome to my exp. There's this extraordinary moment in an interview that Hannah Arendt gave in 1964 on German television with Günter Gaus, where she says when she read the transcripts that Eichmann had been interviewed by the Israeli Secret Services and by one policeman in particular, and he had documented this conversation, she said, I read them and you know what, I just laughed out loud. I laughed and laughed and laughed. It's hard to think of a more singularly inappropriate way to respond to the memoirs of a mass killer. And to some extent, that was what got her into trouble with her reports on Eichmann in Jerusalem, where she wrote in this really kind of quite brutally ironic way, in a way that sounded like she didn't care. Irony produces a dissonance in Arendt's thinking. She loved it as a form. She could also be quite cutting. Generally, I'm not saying that irony isn't necessarily a great quality, but she was using it as a form of judgment. And I often go back here to a point that the great W.G. Sayable once made, and he was talking about Jean Amaret, who was a Holocaust survivor. And Amaret also uses irony a lot. And Sayable says irony takes us to the limits of the sayable. It's that point where you can only repeat the obscenity. And in that repetition, you are revealing the horror, the meaninglessness of those statements. So I think in Brother Arendt's own voice, that ironic voice, was terribly, terribly important as a way of countering the banality of evil. So the laugh isn't like, ha ha ha, he's insignificant. The laugh is to say there's this gap, this moral gap that's opened up where only irony can be located. So there's a very famous essay that Arendt wrote called Lying in Politics, which is now very popular for maybe obvious reasons, because people want to understand what it means to have a culture where we have habitual lying and where we're being lied to all the time and nobody seems to care that we're being lied to. So this essay has become very important, Lying in Politics. What's often missed about that essay is the section in which Arendt talks about the figure of the storyteller. And she's drawing from her old friend who committed suicide as he was trying to escape Nazi-occupied Europe, Walter Benjamin, and his essay, The Storyteller. Benjamin said, and this was in the early part of the 20th century, that the storyteller as the person bringing judgment and a sense of just sense to the world is a disappearing figure. Technology's taken over, there's too much communication, too much repetition, we're losing the wisdom. And in the Politics and Lying essay, Arendt says the storyteller has a political function. And this is why, whether it's a historian or a novelist, she says, and history and literature are my two subjects, so this is very important to me. The storyteller's job is to make us accept reality for what it is. And this sounds counterintuitive because storytellers are well known for making things up. But what she's saying is storytellers are the best storytellers, the best historians, the best novelists, reveal something that's really difficult for us to comprehend or face up to. That, she says, is the political function of the storyteller, who then allows judgment. We're not going to be able to judge if we're just sort of looking at competing fictions of the world. We can see this in the culture wars. What we need to do prior to that is to have the storytellers and the historians who can give us the forms of understanding in which to comprehend an appalling reality. Now, loneliness is key to her understanding of what allows totalitarian or fascist systems to come in to play. And there are several types of loneliness she talks about. There's the loneliness which goes with modern culture, which makes people very susceptible to conspiracy theories, to fictions, to a version of the world in which there are villains and everyone's out to actually get you, rather than the version of the world that says you're totally insignificant. I mean, that you can see that in conspiracy theories today around COVID-19. Rather than thinking this is an awful disease that may or may not kill me, conspiracy theory feeds into the idea that no, people are out to get you because you're really so important that they might be out to get you, rather than this sort of horrifically random event, natural and human event. So loneliness does make people susceptible. But what she'll also talk about is the kind of loneliness when the world no longer makes common sense. Kant was a great believer in the idea that we had to share a perceptual meanings and sense of what the world was grounded in. And once that goes and you just have competing opinions, then the loneliness that sets in is because you don't know what is true anymore. We can't agree on what is true anymore. And that's an epistemological crisis, but it's also, Arendt would say, and she's not the only one, President Barack Obama made it quite recently too, it's not just an epistemological crisis, it's a moral and political crisis too.